interesting conversation here today with Captain Dan Petrovich. So without further ado, I just like to welcome everybody for joining us here to our Wednesday webinars. It's starting to become a regular thing, really enjoying it. It gives us an opportunity to speak with people in the industry like Captain Petrovich here, like Erkan Ozmerk, admissions manager here at Wayman last week. We're going to have lots more guests as we come into it. I think it's a really interesting time for learning, you know, when things are in turmoil and we have, whether we want it or not, extra time to learn, and for everyone joining us, clearly interested and passionate about aviation. So I hope to be able to fill that interest for you. I am Wayman Eddy Louis, second generation here at Wayman Aviation, flight school here in South Florida, 33 years in Fort Lauderdale, Miami area, training thousands of pilots with a nice big fleet, 42 aircraft here. And I've had the honor over the last year going on two to work with Captain Dan Petrovich as one of our pilot examiners. So he actually takes the time to fly with our students after all their training and preparation, and makes the call if they're safe, if they're ready to have the certificate, their pilot's license. So that relationship has grown. We've gotten to know him very well, and so we're so fortunate to have him here to be able to talk to all of you and to share his learnings, his thoughts on not just the airline industry with all of his experience, but also what he's been seeing in flight training as a pilot examiner. So good afternoon or good evening to you, Cap.
Hey, good evening, Eddie. How are you?
Very well. So I think you're on a flight right now. Is that right?
Oh yeah, I got my uniform on anyway. So no, I'm in Tel Aviv right now. Just came over today. Be heading from Newark, New Jersey, and be heading back to San Francisco tomorrow evening.
So you got into Tel Aviv yesterday?
No, this morning.
Oh, just this morning. That's a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah, just this morning. And we let's see. Let me look. It's 9 o'clock in the evening here, Tel Aviv right now. And then we leave tomorrow night at midnight and head to San Francisco.
That's a pretty long haul. How long is that from Tel Aviv to San Francisco?
15 hours and change.
Wow. Is that a multi-crew situation?
Yes, even coming over from Newark. Right now, I'm actually training a new first officer on the 787. He's just coming off the 777. And this is part of the training process. He has to go out and get operational experience flying the line after his classroom and simulator training.
That's really interesting. And how long, well, before we get kind of into that, well, how long have you been with United?
35 and a half years.
Wow, that's a whole career. That's exciting.
Yeah, 17 months to go.
Oh, you're kidding, that soon?
Yep. I have to retire at age 65.
All right. And so I guess enjoying every flight you can right now.
Oh, absolutely. Just I love what I do, and it's a passion. To take a little spin off the current situation in the world with Corona, aviation's a virus. It gets in your blood. You know that.
It is. It doesn't let go very easily, that's for sure. I haven't found any antidote yet. Actually, I always like to find out, how is it you got interested in aviation?
Well, my father was a pilot, and actually he steered me away from aviation and steered my brother away from aviation as well. And we both ended up learning to fly and becoming pilots. And we both got hired the same day at United Airlines, which was kind of funny.
Wow. Well, so were you were training together at the same time, or were you training separately?
No, he's 4.5 years younger than I am. And
Okay.
I actually trained him for part of his pilot certificates, his private and his multi-engine, and part of his CFI. I had been a manager at a grocery store, an assistant manager at a grocery store, and said, I really don't want to do this anymore. I'm working 80 hours a week. I'm only 20 years old, but I'm tired all the time. I want to find something that's fun. And I took 3 flying lessons and quit my job. Got a job at the airport pumping gas in airplanes, and it just took off from there. That was 43 years ago.
So your father was a pilot as well. Did you have a chance to fly with him?
Actually, yes, I did. On multiple occasions. I flew a 727 with him as a flight engineer on my first trip with United.
Mm-hmm.
Then I flew with him a couple more times as an engineer. And then I flew once, or actually twice, with both him and my brother. We all crewed a 727.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, and then I also flew as co-pilot on the 727 with him and co-pilot on the 747 with him.
Nice.
And most recently, what's really interesting is that my brother trained me as a training check airman at United on the 787. And recently, I just gave him a check ride, and both of our sons were riding in the jump seat.
Wow. So definitely it's in the blood. That's
It
great.
is in the family. And I have a son who's also an aviation mechanic.
Wow. All right. That's excellent. But did you ever get to fly with him in a training capacity, like a small aircraft? Did he ever, do the ride along when you were a kid or anything like that?
Oh, my dad?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I took him up at a Cessna one time, and he was used to flying a 727, so it was kind of funny. And he flared at about 50 feet, and it just didn't work out for him real well.
That's excellent. That's excellent. It's actually one of our questionnaires when students apply to us. We have a little question in the application that says, "Do you have any friends or family in aviation?" And that I learned that question almost 8 years ago. That people, some people just have the passion, have the love, stare at airplanes all the time, and they're the first in their family to go for a flying lesson or a discovery flight. But I also find that if you have friends or family in the industry, it's more than just a dream. It's a career. You put in the time, the effort. It's a particular kind of lifestyle. And if you've been exposed to it through a parent, an uncle, a family friend, I think they just have a more realistic grasp of what it means to be in the aviation industry.
That's very true, Eddie, because I have an aunt. My dad's sister was a flight attendant at Delta. My mom's sister worked for National Airlines and eventually Pan Am. I have a couple of second cousins who worked for the different airlines throughout the industry. So, and my brother actually married a flight attendant. So we have quite the aviation pedigree throughout our entire family.
Probably a lot of shop talk at Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah. The wives get a little bored with that.
I bet. Well, to give an idea to everyone that's joined us now, we've got a good number of people now in the Zoom, and I think a few people following us online as well on Facebook. Again, please let us know where you are in the chat room. And if you have any questions for the captain, whether it's about flight training, examiners, or his experience in the airlines, please type them into the chat. We'll try to get to them. What I'm hoping to do is, first kind of talk about how you got to where you are, and how you see things on the airline side. The current situations, the cycles that happen in aviation. And then we'll come back to being a pilot examiner and what you're seeing in flight training, any advice you might have for those upcoming pilots. That's kind of the plan for the next, a little bit less than an hour that we have with you. So again, thank you for giving us the time. I know you're in your hotel room and trying to get you away from those Tel Aviv sunsets. All right. So you named quite a few aircraft there. What type ratings do you have? Is it all on the Boeing line?
We do have the Airbus 320. We've parked a number of airplanes over the years as they aged. As you know, the older models, the old 727, 737s. Currently, we're flying the 737s, the newer models, the 7, 8, 900. We do have some MAXs. Understand that Boeing has now been allowed to start the MAX construction line again, and they should be out flying. They've passed all the tests that are required. We have 757s, 767s, 777s, 787s, and of course the Airbus 319, 320.
And are you typed on the whole Boeing line?
I'm not typed on the whole Boeing line, but I have flown the Airbus 320, the 27, 37, 47, 57, 67, 777, 87.
Got a full deck.
Yeah, just different seats airplanes. So, and a couple of the airplanes I flew multiple seats in.
You have any favorites amongst those?
Cessna 310R.
Yeah, it's a beautiful plane.
Yeah, I love the 310R model with the long nose and the seat, the 90 series King Airs. I always loved those. I flew those a lot. But of these airplanes, actually, the 727. It was a fun flying airplane. It was totally self-sufficient. Had an air stair in the back. It was a round dial airplane, and you had to fly it.
Oh yeah.
Of course, now the 787, it's got a lot of magic in it, a lot of computers. I've had to change a lot over the years, from using round compasses to flight management computers and
Yeah.
data link and satellite links and all kinds of other things. But the world is so advancing, and this industry is so dynamic. Either you keep up or you get left behind.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of the things that I mention a lot is that aviation, especially like at the upper ends of corporate and airline aviation, you are flying some of the most complicated equipment that mankind has ever built, right? These really advanced systems of systems, right? And you've seen that progression.
Yeah, it used to be in the older model airplanes, like some of the people here probably have seen as well in their foreign countries, the 727s and 737. You had to manage the systems. You had to turn them on, you had to turn them off. You had to synchronize your generators, things like that. All that stuff's automatic now. A lot of things are more automatic, which leads to a reduction in required flight crew members, except now that everybody's flying more globally, so now that increases the number of flight crew members you need, because we're limited in how many hours we can actually sit in the seat and fly the airplane. Mm-hmm. But the understanding that automation and how to use it, and then what happens when it fails, you have to revert back to being a pilot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had somebody refer to it as more of from active, instead of being an active pilot, you're more of managing the aircraft, right? The other thing I've also heard quite commonly is the common saying that, you know, you fly X hours a year, but you really get paid for those 30 minutes when you got to figure out what the heck is going on, when you got a red light going off. That's what you get paid for.
Pretty much. It's as my dad told me when I first got into it, he said, it's hours and hours of boredom, punctuated by sheer moments of sheer terror.
I believe it. You know, I heard an anesthesiologist tell me that exact same line. Moments of like hours and hours of boredom and moments of sheer terror. Wow. Did you find one of those to be the most challenging to fly? I mean, like I said, automation has made it easier, but is there one that was particularly squirrely for you or difficult?
Yeah, actually, again, the 727, because all the three engines were in the back of the airplane. Mm-hmm. So it really moved the center of gravity back in the aircraft. So the wheels were actually further back than the center of gravity on the airplane. So and it was more landing than anything else. If you got down close to the ground and you're right on the edge of the flare and you pulled back on the stick, you actually drove the wheels into the ground and made a harder landing. Really? So it was having to know where the tires were, even though they're 60 feet back of you, when to release a little bit of back pressure so you would roll it on the runway.
Interesting. Well, that's when it counts, right?
Yeah.
So I've got a question, actually. Questions are coming in on the chat. Rashad, who I believe said he was from Trinidad, wants to know if you felt much of a difference going between a yoke and a side stick on the Airbus and the Boeing.
No, not really. The trick they teach you in the side stick is they call it, and I'm going to put my hand up here, they call it stirring the pot, which people tend to do. You grab that side stick and you kind of move it around thinking you're flying a control wheel. And it's all fly-by-wire. Mm-hmm. So when you move it, it moves. And then you just put it back to the neutral position with the stick. The 777, the 787, the newest Airbuses, everybody's fly-by-wire now. So it feels, and it's almost instantaneous when you move a flight control. So there's no real difference. 2 days ago, I was flying a 172. Yesterday, I flew a 787. So I kind of go back and forth between all kinds of airplanes all the time.
And that's excellent, because a lot of captains, we do have captains pretty regularly that reach out to us to rent a 172 or to fly around South Florida while they're here. And honestly, they create more trouble for us than your average 172 pilot, because it's been so long since they've hand-flown a small aircraft. There's definitely some retraining to get back to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, Eddie, part of my process of becoming an FAA examiner, designated pilot examiner, was the training I did with Wayman.
What's that process like, becoming a pilot examiner?
the FAA is looking for people to become examiners. You really don't work for the FAA. You're a contractor for them. And you apply for the process, and they're looking for basically trained evaluators. And being a training check airman at United, or what we call a line check airman,
Sure.
Where I train pilots in the new airplane, and I've done it on the Airbus, the 767, 777, and now the 787. I'm already a trained evaluator, and the FAA looks at that and says, "Hey, this person knows how excuse me, to evaluate people and how to look at them and see what it takes." You apply to the process. The FAA in Oklahoma City looks at everybody's criteria, their applications, and decides whether or not they meet the minimum qualifications. And eventually the local area flight standards district office puts in a need for applicants. And they send a few of the applicants to the names to the FSDO, the Flight Standards District Office. And when they do that, then they reach out and do interviews. The big thing in anything that we do, and I know you guys know this there at Wayman, safety is the top priority, period, end of story. And that's what the FAA is looking for too. When I make a decision on whether or not I'm going to issue a certificate to a pilot during a check ride, are they safe? Would I put a family member of mine in an airplane with them? So that's kind of the way the FAA looks at how they're going to pick who's going to be a designated examiner. Then the process is finishing the interview, some online training, go to Oklahoma City for a week and go to the classroom training. Then there's check rides with the FAA, practice orals with the FAA, and then eventually I would like come to your school. I would have a student, and the FAA would sit in and watch me do an oral examination, do a flight check, and then they would sign me off to be an examiner.
I remember when you asked us for that, and I forget what student it is that we said, "Oh, you can go ahead and fly with this person," but he was like, "Oh, I don't want to fly with the FAA in the backseat."
Yeah.
We always put him at ease. Like, no, they're not evaluating you; they're evaluating him, right? So you're gonna make sure that he's definitely gonna be fair and safe with you because he's got the FAA in the backseat. But I find by and large, the examiners are all very fair, have a lot of experience like yourself. And everyone kind of has, all the examiners kind of have like their specialty, their niche, like some are very theoretical. They go deep into the knowledge, sometimes beyond, what a private pilot would know. Others have like find it to be like the one day that they're going to teach you everything they've learned in an entire aviation career. We've got those examiners that do like the 6-hour check ride, or I remember my check ride was an all-day affair, my private, and this was way back when I was 17. It was an all-day affair, and we didn't fly until maybe 4 p.m. or something like that.
Right.
And he would just tell these long stories because I don't know, I think he felt like that was the only time he was ever going to sit with me.
Well, yeah, and going along with those lines, it's something we want to do. We want, as an examiner, we want the applicant to come to us, but when they do, they have all the tools they need in their toolbox, or the instructor and chief flight instructor would not have signed them off to go take the check ride. But what we like to do is give them a couple more tools in their toolbox before they go out.
That's excellent. That's excellent. We have a saying. We do these things called waypoints, which is kind of our company culture and our training. And one of them is being prepared. And being prepared is really, a lot of it is about check rides. I mean, pilots are always prepared. We're always doing pre-flights and flight planning and checking our weather and weight and balance. It's all about being prepared, right? Being ahead of the airplane. But in regards to check rides, I stole this saying from boxing. I had a friend that was a kickboxer, and he used to tell me that you don't win a fight on fight night, right? That on fight night, you're gonna win, and you better believe you're gonna win because you've trained harder, longer, tougher than the other guy. So on fight night, you're just there to collect your belt.
That's it.
So, yeah, I always liked that analogy. And then it connected with me a few years ago for aviation, right? You shouldn't pass your check ride on check ride day. You pass it when your instructor signed you off, right? You just have to demonstrate to the examiner that you're safe, you've done your work, you've done the requirements above and beyond, and that day you're there to collect your ticket.
It's one of the things I tell them, Eddie, right up front is, I'm here. I'm a passenger today, and you're taking me for an airplane ride. Show me all the neat things you learned.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. And you're very good at putting people at ease. You know, that's I know that's something that the FAA examiners kind of. There's such a high stress environment. I don't know anyone that sleeps the day before their check ride. I know before my last one, I probably got like 3 hours of sleep in because you just keep waking up like, oh, before your alarm, you're like, oh, I gotta go. And then after a check ride, it's like the best sleep you've ever had.
Yeah, absolutely. And once you've taken that check ride, you've for lack of a better word, broken the seal for check rides.
Sure.
You learn that, hey, it's just a check ride. All you have to do is do what you've learned.
Mm-hmm.
And I was giving a check ride up in Lantana just a couple of days ago, and somebody asked me, so how many check rides do you take? Well, this year I've only taken 3 between the FAA and United. Last year I took 9.
Wow.
So if you do your procedures the same way all the time and you do the right thing and you're safe, it's no big deal.
Well, it's right there in the name. They're checking on you, right? Checking that you've done your work and you're doing things like the way you're supposed to.
That's it.
Yeah, I think, people often say that the instrument check ride is the hardest or your CFI check ride is the hardest, but that private, it's because you're jumping into the unknown. You don't know what to expect. So
yeah, it's that first step.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I would love to talk to you about your time with the airlines and United in particular. So you mentioned your history, extensive history with United Airlines. We mentioned briefly before our Zoom started here, we were talking about the cycles of aviation, and you've seen those inside of United, right? Can you tell us kind of what ups and downs you've seen in your time with United Airlines?
Just a few over the years. I started taking flying lessons on May 10th of 1977 down at Opelika.
Yeah, wow, that's our historic base. We've been there 33 years.
Yeah, I was in a little place called Tercere, which doesn't exist anymore. And it was over in the northeast corner of the old Hangar 1, the original Hangar 1, the old Marine Corps hangar.
Yeah, Hangar 1, they had the tower. Yeah.
And I started, and I literally jumped into aviation. I went from May 10th of 1977 to December 6th of 77, and I got a private multi, commercial multi-instrument.
Wow, all that in 6-7 months, wow.
Yeah, and then I got my CFI 2 months later, and within a year I had a double I multi-I. I just found out what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And
it was a lot cheaper back then too, right?
Yeah, it was a lot cheaper back then. Yes, yeah. I think a 150 was like $15 an hour.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You couldn't get like you couldn't get a 30 minutes of gas for $15 right now.
Yeah, no kidding. And mid 79, I had enough hours to start applying to the airlines, and I actually was interviewed. And unfortunately, it was actually a downturn. We were going into a mild recession in that period. United ended up laying off 800 pilots they had hired, and so were all the other. So I could not
get your interview.
Right after my interview, so I never got hired.
Wow.
Yeah. So the next cycle, and there was a big down cycle, and it was hard to get jobs in corporate aviation because all the furloughed airline pilots went out and got all the good corporate flying jobs. So I worked as a flight instructor. I did find a corporate job. I ended up running a flying service up in Bartow, Florida for a couple of years. I had a 135 air taxi operation, Part 91 lease operation, and a 141 and 161 Part 61 flight school.
Bartow is a great field out there. Bartow Flying Services there. It's a good spot.
Yeah, that's where I was, chief pilot and director of operations.
Excellent.
And then I got hired with United in 1985 when the uptick started. And during 1985, United hired over 1,000 pilots.
Wow, that's quite.
And the industry went crazy for a few years, and then it went down again. And
what was it in '85? Because I think, all right, because there was like the there was a downturn like early 80s, like 81. I think it was like savings and loan.
Yeah, it's actually 79 all the way through 85.
Wow.
Yeah. And then and it was just a mild recession. Gas prices went through the roof at the time.
Right.
You know, we went from, I think it was like 52, 55 cents a gallon for gas, gasoline for your car up to $1.50. So people were paying triple the price for gas for their car, and long gas lines at the gas stations and all kinds of crazy things going on at that time. In 85, there was all of a sudden people were retiring, and the airline saw this boom, and the economy had taken off and was doing really well. And that went through the mid 90s.
Now, all those pilots retiring in the 80s, I guess those would have been like pilots from like maybe Korean War. Where we see that?
The last of the World War II pilots and then the Korean War pilots, yes. They were all retiring at that point. So there was a lot of openings going on, and the airlines were expanding. They were buying airplanes. Boeing was making a lot of airplanes at the time. Airbus was just starting up in the 80s. So you had a lot of things going on and building at the time. And a very strong economy. And of course, the economy cycles. You know, we've seen that in the stock market. But just like everything else in the world, everything cycles. And into the mid 90s, things were going really great, and it kind of just cruised right through. And then 9/11 hit.
Yeah, that was another tough one. Oof.
We saw a major downturn. We saw loss of pensions. We saw 50% pay cuts, having to pay for our own benefits. But you know what? It was still a good job.
Sure.
You know, especially if you like to fly airplanes. It was still a lot of fun, a lot of good people. We did end up furloughing a number of people over time. We brought them back. Some went back into the military, active duty. Others found jobs other places with corporations, or they went back to flight instructing, or they had the opportunity. And one of the opportunities in this job, Eddie, is you can do other things on the side because you have limited hours you can fly in accordance with the FAA regulations. So you have so much time off.
It does seem like every captain has a side hustle, right? Like at the pilot shop, I'd say a third of the things at our pilot shop are made by captains on their spare time.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like me. I have the time to be an examiner, but I also sit on the advisory board over at Broward College. I work with you all. I'm a flight instructor as well. I do some home construction. I've got multiple other projects working on it. As you know, I work with the pilots union and deal with peer counseling on a professional level for incidents, accidents, and death and grief issues. So it gives you the opportunity to have a lot of time off to do other things. I coached probably 300 teams in youth sports over the years as well, because I've had the opportunity to have the time off to do it.
That's excellent. That's a big impact. Yeah, I've heard something along the lines of in the majors or just airlines in general, that the average pilot works about 12 to 15 days a month.
That's pretty much it. The max is about 18.
18,
yeah, we're limited to 1,000 hours a year of flight time. And that's the max. And then depending on your contract, how many days in a row, how many hours in a day, things like that, all come into play and with your contract and where you're working.
Well, that's excellent. So you've been able to have a lot of impact just on friends, family, youth through coaching. That's a huge one. I think coaching really helps to shape young people, get that competitiveness, that ability to feel that they can do things, they can accomplish, they can be the best, they can be a winner. I think it's a really important one. I mean, now we get into the whole area where everyone gets a participation trophy. And that's a whole other side conversation. But at the core of it, that social dynamic of working in a team, succeeding, it's very important.
Yeah, and it's about the focus I had as a coach was not about who's the best, who's going to go on, who's going to do this, who's going to do that. It's how do you work as a team, and what kind of a lesson can I take and teach you to take being a team player into life? Because when you get in the cockpit of that airplane that's right behind me there, you got to be a team player.
Sure.
Everybody's got to work together.
So during your time at United, you've seen the development of CRM and how that's changed and modified what we're talking about here, because your team is your crew. right?
Yeah.
And so for those of you that are joining us, CRM is crew resource management. It used to be cabin resource management. How have you seen that develop?
Actually, I saw it start to develop in the early 70s as, and not to brag on United, but to brag on United. They started, it was called CLR, Command Leadership and Resource Management Training.
CLR.
Yeah. And that's how it originally started. And then it morphed into CRM. And because the FAA said, hey, we really like this program. Can we work with you people more? So it's an integral tool of what we go through in training. And we use it in the cockpit all the time. Yeah, I may wear the 4 stripes, but on this particular trip, since I'm training a new co-pilot, I have 2 relief pilots because we're only allowed to sit in the seat 8 hours. And this was about a 10.5-hour trip coming over from Newark.
Mm-hmm.
To me, everybody's a captain.
Sure.
You're just a captain in waiting.
You know, it's kind of funny. Sometimes here in the kitchen at the flight school, we've got a lot of commercial pilots. All the instructors and even the students have reached it. So you often hear this captain, 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 captain.
Yeah.
What was that movie where everyone's like doctor, doctor, doctor? Kind of the same idea, but it's fun. It's fun. We have a good time with it. But it has been, I think the whole concept of CRM has been really instrumental, and we've adapted it not just from the aviation mindset, but in the flight school, we consider CRM in both cabin and crew resource management, right? Like, do you keep a well-organized workspace, cabin, things like that? And also, do you get along with your coworkers, your colleagues, not just in the air, but on the ground? The crew is far more than the 2 or 3 pilots sitting in the cockpit, right? You've got your flight attendant staff, you've got your ground crew, you've got dispatchers. Someone told me a statistic that for every pilot in the cockpit, there's 50 people in support.
That would not surprise me at all. I mean, just our flight attendants, as you mentioned, we're locked in the middle too, for somewhere up to 17 hours at a time, depending on the flight, or we'll be together all day, type of thing. So that teamwork is important. But the support staff on the ground, you got the customer service agents, you got the people loading the bags, you got the people out at the front desk checking people in. You've got the food service people, the fueler, the mechanics. I mean, it goes on and on and on. Reservations people. There's a tremendous support group behind what we do.
Yeah, I often find myself doing a lot of career counseling because, everyone loves the idea of being a pilot, but it really isn't for everybody. I feel like most people can reach their private pilot. Definitely a little bit more effort needed for your instrument and your commercial, and really to get all the way up. It's a bit of a pyramid, right? To get all the way up to the upper echelons like you are. But a lot of people, I can think of one super smart, really intelligent student we had a while back who just kept getting kind of dizzy from earaches, right? Just part of his biology. He suffered through it and got his private pilot's license, but he said, that's it for me. And I believe he went into airport operations, right? Just because you can't make it in the cockpit, there's plenty of jobs and things available in the aviation industry as a whole, right?
There's thousands, literally.
Especially where we are. So South Florida is a huge aviation hub with 2 international airports, Miami International being the busiest cargo airport in the country. It's this huge hub that connects the Caribbean, South America, North America, Europe. I feel you can go to any warehouse complex in Broward or Miami and find some sort of aviation company, right? Someone's redoing oxygen systems or landing gear. They're throughout the whole area. It's a big industry here in South Florida.
Oh, huge, yes.
So you've got to, I'm sure, be aware of COVID is happening. It's impacting all of us. It's how come we're doing this by Zoom. I imagine this must have had a pretty dramatic impact at United. Are you taking more precautions? Are there different processes now?
United has really gone the extra mile on this. Every plane on the overnight is thoroughly cleaned and wiped down. I mean, and even they even go through and spray the cabin. And I'm not just talking the seats. I'm talking the armrests, the tray tables, the window shades, everything. And then in between each flight, they also go through and wipe down everything. They have a cleaning crew that comes and cleans and picks up, straightens things up, and then another crew that comes through and wipes everything down again, just to make sure between every single flight. As far as the crews, we all have kits. We have sanitary wipes, Lysol wipes, alcohol wipes, etc. It's blue. I don't know if you can see it.
I see
it. There. And we have a bag of those, rubber gloves. Sure. We wipe down the cockpit when we get in the cockpit. We are required to wear our masks in the terminal and at the boarding area and in the airplane. We do not have to wear them in the cockpit because of the need to maybe put on the oxygen mask.
Oh, true.
But if you choose to wear it in the cockpit, you can. It just makes it, you just got to remember to remove it before you have to put the oxygen mask on in case you need it. But whenever we go to the cabin, we have our mask on. Everybody takes high precautions. We have precautions overseas. We have specific procedures at international destinations because we're exempt from, as crew members, we're exempt from the quarantine in foreign countries, but we have to stay in the hotel because they accommodate basically just crew members. So we stay in the hotel. We can gather as a crew, but they really don't want us going outside. So the airlines have really taken a real positive stance. They're very concerned about this. This is a massive, has had a massive impact on the airline industry, as you well know. United's been pretty fortunate in that we have some good airplanes, and we've been able to haul a lot of cargo. We've gotten a lot of cargo contracts lately. So that's been good for United.
Cargo is one of those highlights in the industry that is as strong, maybe probably even stronger than where it was at the beginning of the year. I know that I'm aware of a few airlines that have furloughed, and all those pilots went right over to the big cargo carriers, to Atlas and to all those, and they're happy to take them on. So United, though, historically didn't do a lot of cargo. So has it adapted to more cargo?
Yes, it has. We had a couple of cargo operations. We had ventures into that over the years. It just didn't work out for us. It worked out better just hauling the cargo on our regular passenger flights. And right now, the need for cargo is huge. We do have some revenue passenger flights, like Tel Aviv is a regular revenue passenger flight, although we don't have huge numbers. And we're adding more and more domestic passenger flights as well. The numbers are going up every month, a little bit at a time. It's just going to take time to recover from this. It's a virus, and until they really develop a vaccine for it, people are a little fearful, and it's totally understandable.
I saw a great video not that long ago that really explained the air circulation inside the cabin and those big HEPA filters that the airlines use to filter the air out. I think all the air, it doesn't go up and down the cabin, it goes from top to bottom and kind of circles through that way.
Correct. Yeah, and then they use all the HEPA filters, and it stops from, I believe what I read, 99.7% of any bacteria or small particles.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting. It's going to be with us for a little while until the vaccine comes along. Like I said, it's one of those cycles. Like it was in 2011. I remember the flight school was shut down for 6 months when 9/11 happened, and the airline thing came back sooner than that. But it was more of an isolated event. I mean, this is worldwide, right? So it affects every airline.
Yeah, and it's not just affecting the airline. It's in fact affecting a lot of industries. As you may well know, shipping cargo has been huge. You mentioned, the furloughed pilots. My son got furloughed from Commute Air, a regional carrier up in Newark. Fortunately, he was able to find a job with Southern Air Transport almost overnight. Wow. And welcomed in. And I think he's in Hong Kong right now getting checked out on a 777.
Excellent. Wow.
So it's like, wow. And it's just a timing thing. There's one of the big things with this career is timing.
Yes.
And being at the right place at the right time. And I joke about this, but there's some realism to it. My aunt, the flight attendant, when I was at the airport working so hard on getting all of my pilot certificates, bought me a coffee cup one year.
Okay.
And she gave it, I opened it up and it said, "When my ship comes in, I'll probably be at the airport."
All right. Timing is critical. Timing is absolutely critical. And it's about being prepared when the timing comes, right? The opportunity is going to present itself. It's got to be the timing, and your preparedness has to be there.
Yeah, yeah. And if you're prepared and the timing happens, you're in a great position to make things happen for yourself.
I don't know if you've seen this chart from Kit Darby. I wish I had it on hand. I'd share it. Maybe I'll put it in the notes later. But it's this really interesting kind of map about where we are, the furloughs that are happening, and it kind of gives a timeline for when retirements offset furloughs, and the industry comes back to being neutral as far as hiring, and then starts growing. And I think he tags that as like first quarter of it's going to be at least a year and a half. So I think he tags it at the very end of 2021, beginning of 2022, because retirements have accelerated, right? I think was it American? I think had 700 captains retire or take early retirement.
Yeah, I've heard Americans had a high number. United has, because I work for them, I happen to know a little bit more, 300 to 500 retirements a year.
Wow.
And in the current environment, as you may know, the airlines are offering early retirement plans for a lot of the pilots.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Delta's jumped up from 1,200 last week to 1,700 this week on early retirements out of Delta.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Southwest has offered a big retirement plan. United has, American has. A lot of the airlines are offering those retirement plans. And what that's going to do is keep people on the bottom from being furloughed.
Right. Yeah, and keep them growing with the organization. It makes a lot of sense. And so the issue, the great pilot shortage that we were facing, right up to a few months ago, was really driven by retirements, right? The industry was growing, but it was this overwhelming number of retirements that we weren't producing enough pilots to backfill those spots. So this, I think, is going to make us neutral for the next year to 18 months until that wave of retirements kind of really accelerated.
Yeah, and the retirement age, as you know, was up to 65 8 or 9 years ago, and that kind of starved off that, put off that retirement, that massive number of retirements. But with the expansion of the airlines, the economy, the way it's been over the last few years, that and the aircraft production, the need for travel, the need for transporting goods, cargo, et cetera, has just grown dramatically. This has kind of like hit, for those of you who understand IBM computers, Control-Alt-Delete. So it's kind of hit a reset button on the whole industry. And it has starved that off a little bit, which is something that there really wasn't a pilot shortage. It was a qualified pilot shortage, because post 9/11, people quit flying. There's lots of pilots out there. They just weren't qualified to get jobs with the airlines. They didn't have the hours. They had 600 hours or 800 hours of flight time. They didn't meet the minimum requirements. And they were private pilots, or they just flew for themselves kind of thing. But they really didn't have the ambition. The numbers went down a little bit, but you just didn't have the levels to meet that qualified level. And because who wanted to take a job that had 50% pay cuts and people were getting laid off and you're losing your pension plans, right? So people said, this isn't such a good deal anymore. Well, that has turned around. And now it was going rapidly. And then we're facing these massive retirement numbers, with Boeing saying we needed, 80,000 pilots in the next 10 years just in the United States.
Right.
With the projected growth, they said that back at the beginning of the year. Mm-hmm. Now, all of a sudden, we're on a reset.
Sure.
And so it's given time for all the people that are in your program or the people that are watching today to go out and build their time, just like I did back in the 70s, to become the qualified pilot. So when the airlines do turn around, they can jump in the door.
So I'm curious about this, because you said you had you applied, weren't hired, and then you went back to flight training. How many hours did you have when you finally joined the airlines?
3,500.
3,500 hours. And that was a pretty common number, even 10 years ago. I remember our instructors would fly with us easily into 2,000-3,000 hours, before their applications were looked at seriously. I think with this need to hire so much, a lot of people that maybe weren't as passionate about it were seeing a really good paycheck, a nice lifestyle, and we're jumping into it. And so I think we're going to see those people that weren't as passionate about it, look into other industries. And then there's certain people that couldn't do anything else, right? They couldn't do anything else except be pilots, be in the aviation industry.
Yeah, and I actually, as of late, Eddie, I have found people at different places that I do flight checks at, uh, investment bankers, 28, 29, 35 years old, who said, I don't like this job. I always wanted to be a pilot. So they've quit their job and now they're a pilot. And I've given
Love
them
career
check price
changes.
to get their pilot certificates.
Yeah, I love career changes. Right now, I have at least two accountants and one engineer that's going through the flight program. And it's the same thing, they did pretty well for themselves, but they were tired of being in the cubicle. They wanted a different view out the office window, right? And there's no better view out the office window than the cockpit windshield. It changed everything.
Amen.
Absolutely, absolutely. I had some beautiful sights this weekend. I had a nice long flight. So a lot of time in the airlines, right? And then you decided to pivot back into flight training as a pilot examiner. How long had it been since you'd been in a small airplane?
I stayed in general aviation on and off over the years. About 6 years ago, my youngest son decided he wanted to be a pilot.
Great.
And give up his baseball college career, because he knew guys were a lot better than him. So he'd gotten a scholarship through college to play baseball, and he realized there were people that were bigger, faster, stronger, and he says, you know what, I wanted to be a pilot like you and Grandpa and Uncle Brian, so I want to learn to fly. So he started learning to fly, and I actually got him flight instructors, and he went and flew with them, but I would go fly with him once in a while, just for fun, because I'd maintained my instructor certificates. And as time went on, a couple of people, Mr. Joe Orzik,
sure,
and Lee Mata, Tom and Glema, all approached me and said, Dan, you're a prime candidate to be an examiner. With your experience as a check airman at United, you maintain your certificates. You got a nice personality. You get along well with people. You'd be great for this job. And how far are you away from retirement? I said, well, it's getting close. This was a couple of years ago, and they said it'd be a great setup to go into retirement and still stay in aviation. So I pursued it, and with their help and some recommendations, here I am doing a lot of work for you guys.
And the students love the experience of getting to fly with someone that has all that airline experience like you, because we have a lot of our older instructors that have come back to flight training after having executive jobs or airline jobs, and just sharing the stories. I think every young pilot wants to sit in the pilot's lounge, and hear about that time you flew into Tel Aviv or Narita or wherever it might be. Get some really interesting stories. So we've always been really appreciative of all the examiners and instructors that came back into flight training to share their experience and their knowledge. I think that's just as valuable as the skills, is kind of hearing that mindset, the stories of what it's like to be out in the field. And for anyone that's watching, one of our former instructors, Captain Jay Rollins, he's retired American Airlines. He started a podcast recently called Your Captain is Speaking, and just kind of tell stories and topics about aviation. I recommend it for anyone that's listening. But that's a big move to make that transition. It's a great retirement plan. And going back to what you said about your youngest son, it's really hard to teach family members. So, my father, started the flight school. My brother is a CFI, thousands of hours dual given, and I can't fly with him. It's tough, right? It's just that there's too much other stuff in the cockpit with you, right? And so so my dad, my brother, the first one to say, no, you go ahead and fly with Johnny, right? And so it's kind of better. It keeps it a little bit more professional too. And then, I got to fly with my father this weekend. And so it's none of that stress of trying to get me to do something, but now I'm kind of getting his tips and tricks as we're flying along. It's nice to not have the headache of instructing a family member, but to enjoy being able to fly with a family member, kind of as a co-pilot.
Yeah. And I've done that multiple times over my career, and once you get to them, and especially when you have standard operating procedures.
Sure.
You all have your checklists and you have your procedures. You teach your students exactly the same way when I show up, every student is exactly the same way, as far as their checklists, their procedures, their operations of the aircraft. I know what to expect, and I know what the norm is, and when it's not normal, I can tell too.
Sure.
And in the airline industry, we have standard operating procedures.
Mhm.
So if I get in the airplane, I've actually flown the 787 twice with my brother now.
Nice.
And it's like, okay, we're just pilots.
Yeah.
We're not brothers. We're just pilots. Let's follow the standard operating procedures. And some of those are written in blood, so we follow them.
I'm kind of curious on the flight training side, because as an examiner now for the last a little bit more than a year, right? You've gotten a chance to visit many flight schools and operators. Do you see anything you think that student pilots should focus on? Any frequent issues or variations that you see from flight schools to flight schools?
Not really. The flight schools all follow. There's either Part 61, FAR Part 61, or FAR Part 141, Federal Aviation Regulations, the FAR portion of that. They follow those, and there's specific guidelines on what they have to do. The schools that have the more regimented programs with the stage checks, et cetera, with the 141 schools, you have certain procedures and things like that. They're a little more structured, a little more standard operating procedure. And even the ones with the 141 programs, their Part 61 students are still fall under those same guidelines. You see a lot of those same procedures exactly the same way. It's just they required a few more flight hours to meet the requirements. I work at schools. I don't go out and do very many rides away from schools, like just a private individual here or there. So I work at reputable schools, such as Wayman, and actually you guys are one of my favorite schools to work at.
Thank you.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, and I mean that sincerely. When I go there, I know the kind of student I'm going to have.
Well, that's a good point, because with independents, and I know plenty of great, strong, independent instructors, but I'm sure there's probably a wider variety, right? And you're taking your own safety into account also when you're getting into a private pilot check ride with somebody you've never met. At least if they're coming from this school or this instructor that you've worked with in the past, you have a level of expectations. Okay, this student should be good because I know they came through X, Y, Z. I guess probably a little bit more risk if it's just an independent student kind of phoning you up and seeing if you're available on Thursday.
Well, that's true. And then there's also the student that goes through your program to become a professional pilot. I know when they go from private pilot, many of them they take their check ride in the morning with me. That afternoon, they're in instrument training. They've already started ground school. I know how you guys work with them, and it's a process, and it's a proven process. But then again, I'll get a gentleman who just spent $250,000 on a brand new 172, who's 62, 63 years old, and all he's ever going to get is a private pilot certificate. Sure. So I spend a little bit more time and focus on weather issues, navigation, things like that, because he's really not going to go on and get additional training and ratings as such. He's just going to fall into the biennial flight review, flight review every 2 years, and any other instruction he might want to get along the line. So
good point.
It varies on, and I try to adapt to the student or the applicant, I should say.
That's a good point. Yeah, there's a beautiful thing of being able to fly for yourself. Like I don't fly commercially; I tend to fly for myself, right? But I went for that instrument rating just because I knew if I was going to be flying with my family, that I wanted to be at a higher level of proficiency. And of course, Florida weather. There's gonna be thunderstorms. So it made sense to just put in the time, get the check ride, put in the hours, and the instrument rating I think made me a much stronger pilot.
Yeah, absolutely. And anybody who really becomes a private pilot should really consider doing that, just because they, especially in Florida, because of the constant weather changes we have. We have seasons. We're a peninsula, surrounded by warm water. In the summertime, we get thunderstorms. In the wintertime, we get cold fronts. And in the spring and fall, we get cold fronts that back up as warm fronts. And so we get all kinds of crazy weather.
Yeah, the weather is hourly. It changes from hour to hour from side of the street you're on. It could be raining or not. It could be a beautiful sunny day on one side of the street. Um, but we're lucky that when it does rain, it usually doesn't rain all day, right? If it's raining in the morning, it'll be clear by the afternoon. You can go out and fly, or vice versa. We are coming to the end of the hour, and so I was just kind of wondering if you had any advice for incoming students, students that are still passionate about aviation, want to jump into it now. Um, any thoughts in the current situation and what you see in the future?
Don't give up. I was running. I'm going to go back to 1983.
Mhm.
I was running Bartow Flying Service. I had applied to the Air Force because the airline industry was terrible,
Mhm.
and the Air Force accepted me in late '83 around Christmas time. I had to go to I had to go for training to the Air Force by March
Mhm.
because of my age. You have to be commissioned by the time you're 27 and a half. And I was newly married. And my wife, she was talking to a bunch of military wives that we happen to know. And she said, I don't want to be a military wife.
Hmm.
And I said, okay, well,
Yeah.
you win. So I didn't go.
The team
And
decision.
yeah, I regretted it. I did not like myself for making that decision, but I had made a commitment to her, for better or worse. And so we stuck together. I realized how bad the airline industry was. I had kind of given up hope on it. Somebody sent me a poster, and it's a 727 coming out of the corner of the clouds in the bottom left corner of the poster. And up in the top right-hand corner, it said, "Go confidently in the direction of your dreams, Henry David Thoreau."
Nice.
So I took that poster and I framed it. I put it up in the bedroom at the foot of the bed on the wall. My wife hated it. I saw it every morning when I got up. I saw it every night when I went to bed.
Mhm.
9 months later, I was working for United Airlines.
Beautiful.
I didn't give up. And Eddie, I believe in that so much, I actually have that phrase tattooed on my arm.
Wow. Go confidently in the direction of your dreams.
Yep.
That's excellent. I have to look that one up. Henry Thoreau. That's excellent. And I couldn't say it any better. The aviation is passionate and it's definitely a dream job. Um, Getting to spend every day, smell the jet fuel, waking up in beautiful places. I'm sorry you can't get out and explore on this particular trip, but I know that's an exciting part of it as well. I can't thank you so much, Captain Petrovich, for joining us today. Everything we've covered, we talked about your history in United Airlines, your family flying history, and how you got to be an examiner. All really interesting things. And on behalf of Wayman Aviation, all of our students, the ones that have done check rides with you and the ones that will be doing check rides with you pretty soon, thank you so much for giving us your time today. I wish you a good evening and a great flight back from Tel Aviv. Would you be interested in taking any last moment questions from the chats?
Oh, absolutely. And it's been a pleasure, Eddie, and thank you for the opportunity. And I hope I get to see some of the people on the that I see some names here, and I see you, Clemente, too. So,
Yeah, we've got a lot of, well, it's a rainy day here, so a lot of our instructors and students have jumped in too. I see, of course, Mario Culpepper and Daniel.
okay, Mark.
Hey guys. Hey, Sunny NASA, joining us right now. So we're open to questions. I've got, let's see. Oh, they're coming in. Rashid's got some good questions here. He wants to know if you feel a sense of satisfaction in your aviation life, or if there's more you want to do. Another question is, how do you fast track your career?
Fast tracking is getting qualified and being prepared when the door opens. That's it. It's just preparation and timing. Be prepared so when the cycle goes up, you're in the right spot. As far as continuing in my aviation career, they've offered an early retirement at United. It's not a bad retirement. I mentioned it to my wife. I told her what the plan was, and she said something. So I contacted all four of my children, spoke with them, spoke with their spouses. They all said the same thing. I talked with some of my very close friends, pilots and non-pilots. And I was actually at a quiet birdman dinner the other night and talked with a couple of the guys there, and then a couple of guys here at work when I showed up yesterday in Newark. And everybody said, I'm not kidding, Eddie, everybody said exactly the same thing. You would regret leaving early. You love this job way too much. If I get forced out the door because I'm age 65, I don't have control over that. But to walk away and then stand up there and watch the airplanes fly by would kill me. Do I have plans after this? I'm going to continue as examiner. I'm going to raise my level of examination qualifications. And I think I got a job over there at Tropic with Rob.
Oh, that'd be great, flying seaplanes in the Bahamas all the time. That's great. That's a good way.
Yeah. Yep.
Do you have your seaplane rating?
Yes. I went and got mine with my son a few years ago.
Oh, up in Jack Brown's or somewhere else?
At Jack Brown's.
I love that place. Jack Brown's, for those of you that don't know, is in Winter Haven. You fly Piper Cubs at 500 feet, no radios, and to get your seaplane rating in over a weekend, basically. I did it with my dad about 5 years ago, and he was a seaplane pilot from his early days when he was flying in the Amazon. So it was a refresher. But yeah, it was one of my favorite flying memories there.
Yeah, 2 days, you're in and out. It's great.
Yeah, great. One of the things I loved about them is I got the Sporties, how to be a seaplane pilot DVD when they were still doing the DVDs. And I popped it in, and the guy says, here I am at Jack Brown Seaplane Base. So I was like, oh, great, that's exactly where I'm going. So that's a good one. Absolutely. Yeah, I think aviation really is about passion, about keeping it fun, keeping it interesting. It's not a job that gets routine, right? Yes, maybe the mechanics of it, the showing up at your show time, getting on a flight, going here and there. But if you enjoy it, if you're passionate about it, there's always something new to it, to someplace new to explore, new equipment to learn. You're always growing as a pilot.
That's true, and and this job, when I got hired at United, it was basically a domestic airline, and now look at where I'm going. I've flown the world, and it's the places I get to go see. I've been to Jerusalem and Bethlehem, and I've been to Singapore and Sentosa Island and saw the fort there, and the Imperial Gardens in Japan, and Tiananmen Square and the Imperial Palace and Beijing, and South Africa on safari. I mean, where else do you get these opportunities to do this when you are at work? I mean, it's absolutely incredible.
It is incredible. And the time that you spent with us this afternoon is incredible. Captain, thank you so much for your time with us. And I hope that everyone that's listening will go confidently in the direction of their dreams. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Eddie. It was a real pleasure.
My pleasure. Have a good evening. And to everyone that's watching, this will be kept on Facebook Live. Feel free to keep putting your questions in there. We'll keep trying to answer them. And we'll have an edited version of this for our YouTube channel probably in the next week or so. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Captain Petrovich.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you, Eddie.
Have a good evening.
Okay, good night.